cigar studio in Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome to the Smokin Tabacco Show with your hosts, Matt Tobacco and Smokin Nicole.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Smokin Tabacco Show. My name is Matt Tobacco from SmokinTabacco.com, and I'm joined once again by my beautiful wife, Smokin Nicole. And this week we have a very big show for you guys. We have the one and only Steve Saka. Steve, welcome to the Smokin Tabacco Show.
By the way, you guys have some great bumping music.
I can't take any credit for that. It's all John Carney. He did that.
DJ Carney.
Yeah, John Carney made. So Carney actually made the video with the smoke, and picked out all the music. That was all him.
Really?
Yeah.
But just in his spare time because he's got nothing better to do. He's a hell of a nice guy. What? You didn't pay him for anything?
I mean, we help each other out in multiple ways. You know, we do trade-offs and stuff, and
That sounds kind of wrong, but okay.
no, not in any kind of weird way.
I mean, that's just really, yeah.
Should I be worried? No.
No, it's just, there's certain things you shouldn't say. I mean, there's usually an exchange of cigars.
Is that what we're talking about here, Matt? I'm just trying to. It's okay. I mean, look, I don't judge.
I was more so just kind of covering my ass with the FDA because I didn't want to tell everyone that I get cigars from John from time to time. So sometimes that pays for certain services, and then I send some back, So,
But you're media, so that would be considered. Okay.
It's true. That's my gray area. It's my loophole. Or as Coop would say, as Coop would say, I'm only here for the free samples, right? That's Coop's motto.
Yeah. It's much cheaper to pay for your cigars.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone to the show. No, it's great to have you on, Steve. It's really fun, and I wanted John to be on here tonight. I think he wanted to be too. He definitely had some questions that he wanted to ask you. I don't know how friendly those questions would have been, but I think he has an event tonight.
It would have been horrific.
Oh yeah, it would have been tough.
Yeah.
So he's not here, so you don't have to deal with that tonight.
It's all right. I can deal with John. That's to torpedo me was on the brulee, but yeah, last laugh is mine.
Well, anyways, we're gonna start the show. We have a couple of things we got to do before we get too into it. First of all, Steve, as the guest, what are you smoking tonight?
I am smoking Micallef Black SakaKhan.
Oof, it's a great cigar. It's a great cigar. Yeah, you're going to need that cigar. I know you have this show. Then right after this, you have the U-Boat launch that you're doing later on tonight. So we also have to watch our time with you tonight because I don't want you to have any delays for that. So that's an awesome cigar. We are going to both smoke, Nicole and myself, we're going to smoke the Bewitched, which you can get at twoguyscigars.com. A box of 7 will set you back $124.99 or a single cigar for $19.99, and that's once again as always from our friends at the number 2 guyscigars.com. And we're going to cut and light our cigars with our Cigar Blondie accessories cutter and lighter, which Nicole just filmed a fantastic little review for, and you guys will have to check that out later once we get it up online. I'm going to edit it and all that stuff first, but go and check them out at cigarblondieaccessories.com.
I cheated and already lit mine, but
I know, it's okay.
Why, Abby, why Cigar Blondie? Is it like a blonde chick or a dude that owns Cigar Blondie?
she is blonde.
It's do you know Leo from Nova Cigars? It's her.
I've met, but I don't really know. How about that?
Yeah, the woman who's the CEO of Nova Cigars started her own accessories brand, and it's hers. And she goes by Cigar Blondie on social media.
That's her
So
tag.
she named it Cigar Blondie Accessories.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I know who we're talking about now.
Yeah, really sweet. She's really cool. It's funny we talk about Two Guys Cigars. That's a special shop for you. I mean, I know as a manufacturer now, all the shops you sell your products to are special, but you've known Dave a long time, and you're from the same. We're both from New England.
I think I've been shopping with Two Guys since, 1991-ish, 92.
Wow.
I mean, First time I went in his store was when he was in that really small location in East Boston, and I've spent a lot of money over the years with Dave.
Yeah,
I don't think he's caught up with me yet, so I think I'm still on the negative side of that equation. But yeah. I gave Dave a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the best, that's in the game to do it. He's been around a long time, since what, like 80s, was it late 80s, like 87 or something? When did he first start? Something like that?
I don't even know. I'd have to go by what year anniversary of that and start doing the math, and that's how I figure out how old I am. So,
But he's been around a long time. I mean, he started out a long time ago. He's built quite the business, and I know that was a store for you as a customer, and now here you are in the business, and now you're selling cigars to him. So it's crazy the way these things work out. Before you were in the tobacco business, you were in the computer business. Is that correct?
I was enlisted in the Navy, and when I got in the Navy, I had a control engineering firm. It was very exciting. We did automation systems and primarily process control oriented factories and plants. Yeah, we were quite stimulated.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Then you get into the tobacco business. You work for Drew Estate. You're blending cigars.
I worked for J.R. Cigar before that, and before that, I was already kind of doing what you guys do now, but back in the beginning days when there was like no video and no audio, and it took like 30 minutes to download a porn pic, just bar by bar by bar to get this like really fuzzy, terrible picture. Yeah. You guys have no idea how spoiled you are with your streaming and your order food and all these great things. Yeah, it's crazy.
We got it made now, I guess. Because you were part of some of the early cigar forums, like going way back to the beginning, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Before there were actually web-based forums, I participated in something that's kind of similar to Reddit today. It was called Usenet.
Okay.
And it was really just, look, it was primarily, Usenet was a really weird place. It was kind of like the Wild West of the internet. It was all sorts of pirated stuff going on. There was all sorts of it was kind of like a traffic portal for human trafficking and odd porn. But there was also a lot of these really little niche groups. If you were really into knitters, you would get a knitting group together. Or if you were really into collecting dwarf statues, there'd be a group to collect dwarf statues. So it was kind of the Facebook group of the time, but you had to be kind of technically savvy. It wasn't user friendly, so you really had to know how to get to it, find it, use the applications. It was a lot different back then.
Yeah. I mean, it almost kind of sounds like a little bit of the dark web there.
Yeah, I mean, by today's standards, I think it's probably close to that. Really, I mean, look, I don't even know if it's in existence. I mean, sure it is, right? Nothing ever dies on the internet. But it's just such an outmoded way of communicating that nobody uses it anymore that I'm aware of. But I'm ignorant of it, so I could be completely wrong. Maybe there's a flourishing Usenet world out there that I'm just completely oblivious to.
Yeah, there's probably like a handful or a dozen people who actually still use it, and it's just them. No, they didn't want to make the jump.
They're probably happier without all of those jokers around. I mean, look, when on the first cigar, I don't even know if the third of us, honestly. It was a really small group, and it just kind of blossomed from there. And by the time I left there were thousands of people in it.
Yeah. And now, at what point did you transition from kind of being like just like a hardcore cigar geek, really into it, kind of dabbling with stuff online, and then you kind of be like, you know what, I'm gonna just go right into the business? At what point did you
I never intended going in the business. The way I got into the business was one of the persons that I had met was Lou Rothman. I had met everybody because when I started, there were none of you guys.
Right.
I was it. Nobody talking to cigar manufacturers or visiting factories. So I pretty much knew all the principal players back starting in the early 90s. And one of those guys that I had met along the way was Lou Rothman. And Lou wanted me to write a book about cigars and tobacco. And while we were having a conversation about that, he offered me a job to work at J.R. Cigar and Santa Clara for an obscene amount of money. That's when I got the cigar business. I was first from.
Oh.
That would have started in 1999.
1999. Sorry, your connection was a little fuzzy there, but I kind of made most of that out. So in 1999, you go to work at JR Cigar, and then from there, where do you go after JR?
After JR, well, they got bought out by Alex USA, and I stayed. I don't think I wanted to stay, and so I was on a non-compete for 2 years, and about a year into that is when Jonathan and Marvin from D come on board. So with the summer of 2005. Yeah, it was the summer of 2005.
Summer 2005, you joined to DE.
Yeah, I go to DE to become the president of the company at Drew Estate.
Okay.
And then I was with Drew Estate until, publicly, we didn't announce it until the summer of 2013, but it was really until February of 2013 when I actually really ended up deciding to leave the company.
Yeah. And that's when you left DE to start Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust, correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, I knew I was going to do something.
Okay.
I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I was just ready to leave. It just great company, but the owners wanted to go a different direction than I wanted to go, and it was becoming too taxing because my wife didn't like Miami, so she moved back to New England. So I had factory operations in Esteli. We had corporate headquarters in Miami, and then my wife lived in New Hampshire. And I tried it for a year and a half, and it just, as the months kept going, I was seeing my wife less and less and less, and I finally got to the point like, guys, this just isn't working for me.
Yeah, you gotta have that work-life balance. I mean, you gotta have time with your wife and at home and stuff, and you can't.
Yeah. Let me say this: since leaving Drew Estate, I haven't established that either, so I can't say I see her more often. That part's true, but no, work-life balance, that's never been in the cards.
Well,
I've been really bad at that.
You just got back from Europe. You went over for Intertobac in Dortmund, but along the way, you went and visited some other places too. You went to Switzerland too, right?
Yeah, I haven't taken a legit vacation in like 3 years. So I promised Cindy that we would spend an extra look. It costs so much to fly to Europe now. It almost just seems wasteful to go there and not see something, right? Other than going to the trade show.
Right.
Because it's so absurd. The other thing too is it's such a pain, how long it takes to get there and how long to get back. So we decided, look, neither of us had been to Switzerland. So we decided to tack on a week in Switzerland and just kind of tool around a little.
What did you find? What was like the highlight of being in Switzerland that you experienced or discovered there?
I think that the thing, look, we were in that fairy tale part of Switzerland. We were in the Bernese Oberland. I mean, that's kind of where the whole Heidi story, that's where dragons and castles. And I mean, it's just the scenery is just, it's indescribable as to how beautiful it really is. So I think more than anything, it was just, just being someplace that was just so, it was a postcard 360 almost every place we were.
Wow.
And that's kind of cool. Now, let me say this. If you go, don't be worried about cash because it costs a fortune. I mean, there's nothing cheap in Switzerland. But if you can just set that aside and not think about the fact that you just paid 100 euros or 100 Swiss francs for 2 pizzas, you're okay,
And, you had been posting photos and everything, during your trip. We saw that you had found a tobacco farm out there. What was that? Were they actually making cigars there or?
No. He was growing it for him to cure to use in his pipe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, in his own words, bear with me. These are not my words. These were his words. That his Nazi Swiss government taxed too much on tobacco, so he had to grow his own. Those were his words, not my words. Okay, just let's be clear about that.
Okay,
that's a fair statement.
Fair statement.
So he decided he was going to grow his own tobacco.
So he grows his own tobacco for his own consumption.
Yeah.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah. It was like literally, I don't know, a quarter of an acre maybe. I mean, it was a little tiny He had a little tiny corn plot next to it, which is terrible. You should never plant corn next to tobacco, but that's a separate issue. But yeah, it's just his own little personal thing.
So were you like driving by and you saw this, and then you were like, "Oh, that's a tobacco farm"?
No. My wife made me walk every fucking place, man. Yeah, it's a country of elevation shifts. Yeah, we were doing a walkabout.
And you just discovered this little tobacco plot.
And
you're like, huh.
Which is really more about me just trying to not have a heart attack. But yeah, so
slow and steady.
So anytime I could find anything to stop and look at, that's what I did. There was a lot of, oh, you got to see this. Isn't this beautiful? Let's take a moment and take it in, because when will we ever see this again? When really what I was doing was just
that's still pretty cool though, to stumble upon a tobacco plot and farm and just be like, huh, that's peculiar. What's going on over here? Yeah. No, it's funny. You mentioned, growing corn next to the tobacco not being a good. And now a lot of manufacturers and growers, I should say, a lot of growers and people who own farms, they grow other things on the farm, whether it's in the off season or if it's stuff that's along parallel with the tobacco. Something we don't really talk a lot about, but I'm sure you can speak to. What are some of the things that are good to grow, in a tobacco field or part of a tobacco farm or whatever, to really help? I know a lot of manufacturers do it. Some do citrus fruits, some do eucalyptus. I've heard different things. Just in your opinion, what do you think? What other things work in the soil?
I think the best thing is beans. I mean, beans just give you the best turning silage wise. I mean, it gives you the most nutrients. It's very low impact on the land. So you're getting a big net positive out of growing a bean crop. And because of particularly where tobaccos are harvested, beans are a big part of the diet. So it also works out in that way that you have the beans to share with your workers and whatnot. So I think beans by far are the number one thing that's grown. Now, you see, most of them will grow some sort of edible bean. I'm seeing more soybean because you get a benefit out of that. But there are things that you don't grow. You don't want to ever grow any other nightshades. You don't want to grow tomatoes. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to grow things that are of the same class.
Right.
So, but I mean, but I think beans is the number one thing that most people use as I'm drawing a blank. What's the word for it? As a rotational crop.
Yeah.
For tobacco.
Now, I thought I heard, and I don't know how accurate or true this is, and I don't even remember who it was, but I thought I heard that even some will grow coffee beans on the farm.
I don't know how that's possible. I mean, they can grow coffee beans, but coffee beans are typically grown at higher elevation. Coffee beans are not something that are, I mean, you want a crop that's a quick plant and a quick harvest and a quick till under, and that's not coffee beans. So they may be growing coffee beans on their farms, but I don't believe that has anything to do with the tobacco. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, and then the other thing is, look, you just let the land go fallow. But typically that used to be something you would have to do like once every 3-4 years, and then you would move cattle in on it. But that isn't as necessary today because the soil science has gotten so much better than it used to be. So we just have so much better nutrition. We have so much better way to to monitor the soil and what it needs, and we have so many different fertilizers available to us that you don't have to do it that way like you used to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's there's been a few other people that have come on and talked about, like Nick Perdomo's come on and talked about the farm aspect, and Jose Blanco's been on, and it is interesting to have those conversations with the different things that go on just the growing side, just in the farm and then the soil and the seed and all that before you even get to aging, fermenting, rolling, and any of that. The whole growing process.
It's an entirely different world, and I don't pretend to be an agronomist. I mean, it's like anything. It's a skill set. It's a craft of its own. I just know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. So when you're working on a new cigar or a new blend, or you want to work with a certain kind of tobacco, how involved are you in the growing side of it? Or are you more or less like kind of like, this is what I'm looking for, and then when it's been harvested and it's ready, you kind of take it from there?
Well, that would be true with most things. I mean, there's a few oddball things. Like, I get some special tobaccos grown for me in Pueblo Nueva. So those I have more contact directly with the farmer. We have the San Andreas Sin Compromiso crop. That's something where I'm in contact with that farmer. I'm buying broadleaf in the valley direct, so they don't need my help to grow it, but I have more contact with that farmer, those farmers actually. So it really depends on the tobacco. The particularly the specialty items like the Honduran seed that we reprised for the Mi Querida Black. But in the end, I'm not the farmer. I'm the guy that shows up and looks and stares and nods and pretends he knows what we're doing and
points over there.
Yeah, look, I know basics, but the benefit of the more time you spend with the people that actually do it, the more you learn. You learn something almost every time, And the other thing that's rather odd is it's getting better. It was much more segmented. It was much more, we do it this way because our father did it this way and our grandfather did it this way. Over the years, you have a new generation of farmers that they're much more scientific than they used to be. So you're starting to see a lot of the things get more refined and more specific. Because look, you go to the University of North Carolina and they have a huge ag program for tobacco, but it focuses primarily on, brights and burleys and the tobaccos we grow here in the United States. And even though we grow Connecticut shade and Connecticut broadleaf and Pennsylvania seedleaf here and a few other things, Wisconsin Comstock and whatnot, there isn't much focus on the air-cured black Negra tobaccos. It's just really not part of it. So most of the education that was formal was coming out of Cuba, because they do have an ag program there at the experimental station. And now we also have an ag program that is in Central America, in Nicaragua, that has some focus on tobacco. So you're seeing more young kids, agronomists, go through that program. And the other thing, what's really kind of still odd about our business is the Dutch are still very heavily involved in the growing, the cultivation, and the brokering of tobacco. I mean, here we are. I mean, they really were at the forefront of it in the 16 and 1700s, and here we are, some 400 to 500 years later, and these guys have they're still intimately involved. But you never meet any of those Dutchies, but they're around.
They haven't died out yet, so to speak.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, it's part of what they do.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting to watch. I mean, we've only been, involved with cigars for, I mean, me more than her. I mean, 5-6 years back now. I mean, and I take in everything I can, but it's very small. I mean, you have these conversations with people like, yourself or others who've doing this a long time, and you listen to the stuff that they talk about, and whether they explain something and they're telling you a story, you do pick up how things do change. But more often than not, the more they change, they stay the same, so to speak, is kind of what I pick up a lot of times in conversations with people. Like, oh, we're doing this, but at the end of the day, it kind of all comes full circle in the end. And it's just interesting. And everyone has their way. And you mentioned it before. It's like, well, this is how my father did it. My grandfather did it. And as much as it's that very traditional, that family business, which I think is the heart of what this business really is. As much as people like to do changes and make things change, they do it on a smaller scale. But the grander vision and the grander part of that trade of working with tobacco, it really never changes completely. Some of it really ultimately stays the same. And again, I think that's what makes it special, though. Just keeping the heritage alive and keeping the consistency. Now, let me ask you another question. So, you mentioned this before. We weren't really live yet, but I think it's something that most people know about you. you tend to change your mind a lot, and you've been known to work on blends over and over and over again. How do you is that just from? Are you like? Would you just call yourself a perfectionist, or are you just? Does your opinion always change on something, or your palate always change?
First off, it's not perfectionist. It's that I'm just internally dissatisfied with everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm just never happy.
So you're just a hard person to please.
Yeah, I'm a pain in the ass.
Are those your words, or are those maybe Cindy's words?
I think that's everyone's word. I don't think those are unique. But the thing is, I understand it, and the people I work with it know it. And where it's a little different is most people that are a pain in the ass are not willing to. So, like, I'm doing something right now. I've been trying to get a cutter made forever. Okay.
Okay.
A simple cutter, but I have probably gone through like 4 different people trying to do the prototyping on this thing for well over 4 years now. And I probably spent, I don't know, $14,000-$15,000 in prototyping costs, maybe more. And the way it works is I always tell them to be really picky. I may not buy anything if in the end I'm not satisfied, but I'm going to pay you every step along the way. So I'm going to keep asking you to do things, and you're just going to keep charging me for these things. And I think that's a little bit different. So I expect a lot, but I also don't expect people to not be paid for their time or their effort or their expenses. Like most factories, when you're making sample blends, those are always gratis, right? Almost universally, those are free because they lead to bigger business. In my case, I pay for all the samples for the most part because I make a lot of samples. I mean, I make samples in the thousands, where most people are like, yeah, make me 10 of these and 5 of those. And let me make one bundle. Yeah, this is good to go. I'm not that guy. So I make a lot of cigars. I have to make a lot of cigars that ultimately end up in the trash. But I like to have enough to really be sure. I like to have enough to see, how, because the problem when you're getting samples made is they're almost always made in a factory by one of the best pairs. Because universally pairs, particularly the Boncheros, they don't like change. They make the same blend day in, day out in the same size. And so you need a pair that's much more flexible, much more capable. And so almost universally, those sample cigars are almost always made by one of the absolute, if not the best pair in any given factory environment. And the thing is, that doesn't give you a fair representation of what the cigars are going to be like actually when it comes time to put them in a box. You know what I mean? Because that one single pair, you can't have the unicorn pair roll, 100,000 cigars a month. They're not doing that. You know what I mean? So you have to really you have to see what the typical quality pair is going to do. And a lot of times you have to adjust some of the bunching. You have to adjust the recipe. You need to make it a little easier on them. So there's a lot of little things that I think a lot of brand owners don't really get that involved in, but they do make a measurable difference in the end in the product. And look, and making copious amount of samples is always the best way to go. But I don't expect the factory. I'd probably say probably in the last year, probably made close to 5,000 sample cigars.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That is a lot.
And yeah, it's a tremendous amount of cigars. And you can't expect the factory to do that for free.
No, of course not. I mean, that tobacco's, it's money. I mean, you can't just... But I know exactly what you're saying. A lot of factories, it's like, yeah, don't worry about the samples. We'll get something made or whatever. But, you make so many samples, it's like, all right, we can't give all this away.
But the thing is, they don't ask me. I tell them going into it that this is the way it's going to work. You know what I mean?
Is this where you being a pain in the ass and self-aware of that kind of comes around? Like, hey, listen, I'm going to have a lot of samples made, so I am going to pay for all these because I know I'm going to be changing my mind every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, at least is that,
Here's the funny part. Typically, once I get to the point of a decision, I'm on the decision. You know what I mean? But there are things that I come back to and I look at, I made the first Sober Mesa blend. A year later, I tweaked it and added 2 sizes with the tweaked blend. I make, when I made Sin Compromiso, one of the sizes was disappointing to me in the end. I was not happy with the Intrepido. So I went back and redid that blend a year later. Now I don't know whether the average, I don't think most people noticed because no one ever said, oh my God, it's totally different. But I noticed, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because I was kind of like, this cigar shouldn't be in a box. It's not of the caliber blend wise of the other ones in the line. So, but a lot of times you need time in order to get to that point. You need to, what's it taste like 6 months, a year down the road? You feel about it a certain way today, but then, given hindsight and experience and smoking, hundreds more, you go, oh, okay, I could have done this a little different. I could have done this a little better. So I'm not reluctant to fix things that I consider to be mistakes of mine.
Now, when you're coming out with a new line, you go through all your thousands of test blends and your samples and all of that, and you kind of get to a point where you're like, all right, I think this is where I want to enter production. How many times have you gotten to that point, and then you're just like, and the rollers are already making them. You're in production. You're starting to make cigars, roll them, get them in the aging room, and then you're like, I changed my mind.
In the last 20 years, maybe 3 times, where I've thrown away a month's worth of production. Where I just came to the conclusion that it wasn't right. Look, the other thing you have to understand is it's not just a decision about a cigar, whether a cigar is good or bad. I make good cigars every Tuesday. The problem is you got to figure out, where does it fit into the business? Where does it fit into the brand? How's the retailer going to represent it? What space is it going to grab on the shelf? What am I competing with? And am I competing with someone else, or am I competing with myself? Because a lot of times, a lot of brands are competing with themselves. They do it all the time. They create so much new stuff on the churn and burn that they're really just sucking up the shelf space they already had, just with something new. A lot of the stuff that gets thrown out there, and this is in my opinion, and I know everybody says cigars are the best they've ever been, and that probably is universally true. The quality of cigars today are way better than they were 2-3 decades ago. That's definitely true. But I think there's just an awful lot of mediocrity. Good cigars, decent cigars, they smoke fine. Yeah, but it's not that many really exceptional cigars, in my opinion, that really end up, in the marketplace.
You bring up an interesting point. You talk about, when you're making a cigar, you're bringing a cigar to market. There's the competition aspect of it, 100%. And, a lot of times, we have brand owners on the show, and we'll ask the question from time to time, like, well, like, what cigars other than your own? And it's always like, oh, I only smoke my own shit. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's bullshit, but okay. When you're talking about,
some of it's true and some of it isn't true. Look, first off, you got to buy other people's cigars, so you get cheap, right? You're kind of like, hey. And the other thing is, you have so much of your own stuff that you have to smoke, so that's part of the problem too. I mean, when you're making thousands of samples, and on top of that, you got to smoke. Look, there's sizes, like, I don't personally like Robustos.
Me either.
I don't like to smoke them. They're too short for me.
Yeah.
Okay, there's just no point in it. But look, Robustos are obviously one of the number 1 sellers. If they're number 2 behind Toros. So I have to continuously smoke all the Robustos out of all the lines that are currently in production, just to make sure they stay steady. So there's a lot of smoking that you end up having to do for work that isn't the same as someone at the end of the day saying, hey, I want to enjoy a good cigar and relax and kick back and have my beer. So I think there are. And the other thing too you have to take in consideration is, I think that Nick Perdomo believes in his heart that his cigars are the absolute best. And I think George Padron believes that. And I think that Carlito Fuente believes that, because look, you're the chef. You're getting to make the recipe the way you want the recipe to be. Mm-hmm. So, you tend to be more satisfied with your own cigars than other people's cigars, just because they're made to your palate. And so I think there's some truth to that. At the same time, yeah, I mean, I smoke other stuff, but most of the other stuff I smoke is because someone has given it to me, someone has really recommended it, or it's something that I see being launched that piques my interest. I'm like, oh, I want to try that. So there's a bit of it, but there's not as much as there used to be for me. It's hard to squeeze it all in. I try my best typically to try to smoke one other company cigar every day. And it's not so much for surveying the competition because look, it's all brown and round. There's tons of competitors. It's more just because I'm still a cigar geek and I'm curious. And so I tend to try to smoke. It's typically my second cigar of the day because I want my first cigar of the day to be good. So I don't want to waste that experience on something that I probably am not going to like. And a lot of those cigars I like for the second cigar of the day, if I don't like them right off the bat, they'll get a half an inch at most, and I'll put them down and I'll go to the next thing that I want to smoke. But every once in a while, I'll get something, or sometimes I'll just go back to every once in a while I go, I want a Padron 1926. Oh, I want a Fuente Hemingway in Cameroon. I don't make anything in Cameroon. Sometimes I want a Cameroon cigar. Tatuaje Black. I particularly like that lawn. He calls it a Petit Lancero, but it's more like a Lonsdale. I really like that cigar. So I'll occasionally smoke that. I'll occasionally smoke one of Hoya's cigars. So I do smoke other stuff. But yeah, probably 90 to 95% of what I'm smoking. And we're not talking about cutting and lighting and tasting, but actually trying to smoke through the whole cigar. It's primarily my own crop.
Well, because I was going to say, the thing that would be interesting to me is you mentioned, thinking about like when you make a cigar, well, who am I competing with? I mean, other manufacturers, the thing that I would always curious, like, well, I mean, you're making your own cigars, but you also, you must be smoking stuff that's similar to what you're trying to create, so you know what you're going up against. If Padron's got, the 64 Maduro in a certain size, and you have a cigar that you're trying to make, and you think it might be similar to that, do you smoke those cigars and then go back and think like, well, I'm trying to make something that's a little less.
I mean, the only thing is, so I had one blend, Todos Las Dias. I was trying to make a really strong cigar for that blend. And every time I get to the end of the blending rainbow, I just kept thinking it just tasted a lot like cigars that came from Pepin Garcia's factory. And to me, that just there was no point in it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Why create something that's already there in the marketplace? So yeah, I mean, but look, there's only so many shades of brown and flavor. So ultimately, you're always going to be stepping onto somebody. There's a lot of similarities between a lot of cigars. I think that certain genres, I think Mi Querida, if you're a Liga Privada or a Tabernacle smoker, I think Mi Querida is a good option. I think if you like Padron, I think Sin Compromiso is a good work for you. I mean, is it the same? It isn't the same, but I think that there's a lot of similar traits in what they give you as an experience that I think that there's crossover for. I mean, if you like Davidoff White Label and Romeo and Julieta and Monte Cristo White and Ashton Classic, I think Brulee is better than all of those, but I think that it's in that same genre. There's really only, if we really start to break things down, there's really only like 4 to 6 like really core kind of flavor profiles, right? And everything from there is kind of an extension of that. There's that mild creamy shade style cigar, and there's the Connecticut broadleaf heavy earthy dark, and you got that real spicy peppery Habano kind of lean racy style of smoke. You know what I mean? So
Right.
There's always certain basic pillars, and then everything kind of stems from those.
Yeah, like you only have so many places you can really go to begin with, and then from there it kind of has to take its own journey.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really focus on that I don't know why more people don't, I really focus on a cigar always being smooth. So even when it's a stronger blend, I don't like a cigar that punishes the palate. I don't like one that is offensive. Now, look, there's a consumer that just loves to have their head blown off, right? And there's a place for those cigars. Look, I occasionally smoke it, whether it be a Roma Craft Neanderthal or La Flor Dominicana, double La Hera Chisel, or something like that. But for me, those are cigars that I smoke infrequently and occasionally. They're more the condiment to my smoking experience. The vast majority of what I like is I always like cigars, whether they be mild or whether they be strong, to always be smooth. And the other thing that I always like is I always like for the smoke to have a really heavy, dense texture. I like to be able to almost chew the smoke. I like to feel the smoke. And I like for the finish to be long. I don't want a cigar that doesn't leave a taste in my mouth. I want there to be an aftertaste. I want that to still linger. And the other thing, too, that's really important to me is the retrohale. I always, even though I know very few consumers retrohale, when you make a cigar that retrohales well, it typically will taste better to the consumer that doesn't even retrohale. So that's something that I always really focus on. But so smooth is really big for me. And look, that cuts me out of a certain consumer, right? I have a few cigars that I think aren't as smooth. Unstolen Valor isn't as smooth. U-Boat tonight that we're launching. U-Boat is on the stronger end of my spectrum. I'm going to have a Muestra next year called Krakatoa. It's not a smooth style cigar. So it's not that I don't deviate from it, but as a general rule of thumb, I'm always thinking about a cigar being smooth. And smoothness is not, I don't equate smoothness with strength. Some consumers do. I think you can have something really strong and it can still be smooth.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and it's nice. It was nice of you to like break that down. That talking about how you blend and trying to blend with something smooth and stuff that's not, and just the whole. And I like the analogy that you made about. We got to get to the news here in a second, but I just wanted to say this. I like the analogy you made about even for consumers who don't retrohale, when you blend a cigar that retrohales really nice, it'll still smoke well for the person who doesn't retrohale. And that's a really interesting point, and we don't really get into a lot of that stuff with a lot of people on the show. So it's always nice to hear that train of thought just on that whole process. But I do want to take a quick pause. We have to do our news really quick. Some interesting news, pretty exciting news, actually. Something a little different. Our news is once again brought to you by Micallef Cigars. If you head over to micallefcigars.com today, you can sign up to become an official ambassador. We'll get your ambassador number and coin while you're at it. Head over to Facebook and join the Micallef Ambassador Facebook group. A hell of a time, a hell of a group of people, great people, only Micallef Cigars. Drew Estate. How about that? Drew Estate announces a collaboration with Metallica and Blackened whiskey. Steve, I'm sure you probably saw and heard about this in the news. If not, I'll gonna read it anyway. So last night, Drew Estate held their latest Freestyle Live virtual event, where they announced their next cigar in their portfolio is going to be the Blackened by Drew Estate. The cigar was created with James Hetfield of Metallica and Blackened whiskey master distiller Rob Dietrich. Pretty cool concept. I was talking to, who was I talking to? Was it Coop? I can't remember. I was talking to somebody. No, it wasn't Coop. Who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody, and they were saying, I think it's interesting because it's kind of like, there's been celebrity cigars that have come out. That's no secret, and projects similar to this. And the most recent one I think has been successful has been Espinosa did the collaboration with Guy Fieri with the knuckle sandwich. Yeah. And now you see Drew Estate kind of take that page like, okay, let's do a celebrity collaboration, and they kind of go with Metallica, which is kind of a very cool, interesting group to collaborate and do a cigar with. And we had the cigar in the Freestyle Live kit. It was a good cigar. It was decent. I know you had it too. Yep. And I haven't had the Blackened whiskey, so I can't really speak to that too much because as much as we love whiskey, that's one we don't think we haven't had. But this is an interesting project, and it's really cool, and I think it's going to do really well for them. And you can read more about that article and the sizes and everything that's available at SmokinTabacco.com. It's right there on the homepage.
So that's where I differ with you. I don't know if it will do well. You know what it does, though, Matt? It makes everyone try it.
That's true.
So the cigar is going to get a very wide sampling, more than a lot of others. Because look, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to want to smoke that. So I think that, and that's often the goal when you launch something is you're hoping to get the widest possible exposure, the most people to try it, to find the ones that actually like it. Historically, most celebrity brands don't do well in our industry. They
Right.
tend to be short term. I think the one that Eric's doing with that Espinosa's doing with Guy Fieri may stand a better chance because Guy Fieri is a really heavy cigar smoker and he's really into it. And so far, he's been very active in promoting it, and that makes a huge difference. But very, very, I really can't think of. It's very rare that you have a celebrity brand that does well. I mean, I think one of the most successful tie-ins was probably the CAO Sopranos from a commercial point of view.
That's true.
That one had a good run, but even that one, they eventually die. Um, Consumers don't tend to reward you long term on these type of projects, and I don't mean that won't be the case with Blackened. And look, all of us wish that we could do something, right? You wish you had this relationship with some celebrity that appeals to a wider audience that might get them more involved in your cigar. So I mean, you got to be careful when you talk about it because you don't want to seem sour grapish about it.
Right.
But historically, these projects rarely do well long term.
Are you surprised to see Drew Estate do something like this, or no?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Look, Drew Estate's a much different company than when I was there. Look, they're selling to a whole different group of consumers. They still sell to some of the same consumers, obviously, but they're much more a mainstream brand, appealing to a lot of different people, a lot of cigar people that cigar guys that smoke one or two a week. You know what I mean? It's their Saturday night ritual on their back deck kind of consumer. Listen, there's way more of those customers than they are of the type of guys that tend to smoke my cigars. A lot of my cigar guys they're heavy cigar consumers. They're smoking multiples a day oftentimes.
Yeah, the different demographics of your audience and who you're selling to, so to speak. It's true. Do you find that it's harder to find new cigar smokers introduced to your brand that are maybe just different cigar smokers, and you're trying to get them to make that change to a different portfolio, different palette, a kind of different?
I've had this conversation multiple times with people. The greatest challenge you have as a small manufacturer brand owner is if you're lucky enough to become hot. The question is, once you become hot, how do you start to bridge over to go more into that typical average cigar smoker who's just looking for a cigar that he enjoys, one he feels is a good value, one that he feels is consistent. Because in the end, most cigar smokers, they're never going to watch your podcast. They're never going to read Half Wheel. They're never going to know who Dunbarton is or Steve Saka is. And honestly, they don't give a fuck. But that is literally the vast majority of the market. And that's why you see those brands that sustain the test of time and consistently make a high quality product are the brands that end up becoming those large, the Olivas and the Padrones and the Fuentes. I mean, this is not something that they achieved in a matter of a few years. This is something that they have cultivated over the course of decades. And that's where the biggest challenge comes as a company like ourselves, where like right now we're super hot, right? We're having a fantastic year, and we've had a fantastic year every year since we've launched. Except 2017 was a little rougher for me. But there's only so many of those consumers. Okay, so ultimately you need it to spill over to a wider audience. And how do you reach that wider audience? Well, that's the challenge. It's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit it right on the head. But I mean, the majority are, like you were saying, there's definitely a larger majority of people who are those not as. I feel like, to me, the larger majority of cigar smokers out there, from people I see and I talk to and whatever, and when I'm in shops and I see how people buy and stuff like that, I feel like the vast majority is that buyer who comes in, they smoke maybe one brand, maybe they smoke like 5 brands tops, and that's it, and that's what they smoke. That's all they're gonna smoke. Very once in a while, like, all right, I'll try this, but they like to stick with that same box that they come in, they buy every month, every 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is, however long it takes them to go through it, and they kind of just stick in that circle, and they don't really venture out of the circle too much. I feel like, from our standpoint, we're around people who are constantly smoking different things all the time. So to us, it doesn't seem like that, but I feel like the reality is there's a lot of cigar smokers out there, and they don't do that. They don't smoke all these different cigars all the time. That to them, it's like, no, I have what I like. This is what I want. This is what I'm going to buy. That's it. I think as a general, and I don't know, maybe you can add more to this, Steve, but I think that in the last few years, I think you're seeing more people explore a little bit more. And I think there's a lot more stuff like this and a lot more media on social media. I mean, not everyone watches it, like you said. Not everyone reads Half Wheel or whatever. But it's out there, and it's on social media, and everyone more or less is on social media. So you're constantly seeing these things pop up.
Yeah, you're seeing it, particularly like the large Facebook groups. You see the exposure.
Yeah.
And a lot of the consumers they're not the type of consumer that is keyed in. But you also see it by the pictures they post. I mean, I scroll through some of these cigar groups, and I'm like, man, that guy thinks that's a great cigar, and it's really just an okay cigar. But It isn't my place to tell him that's an okay cigar. He's got to discover that on his own. But what ends up happening is the more time a person spends, eventually they will find their way to something that is really perfect for them. And it takes a long time. It's a long effort, and I don't think that most people can appreciate it. How much time really it requires. And the problem is the consumer of today, nor does the market reward you for being consistent or for being brand loyal, because the easiest sale is the new sale. If I make a new brand, I go to the trade show, I'm selling 16,000 boxes of whatever I make new, right? That's a much easier deal than me trying to sell my 500 boxes of this every month and my 400 boxes of that, my 200 boxes of this size that isn't as popular. So just the way the market works, it really doesn't reward the manufacturer in the short term or even in the midterm to actually make a high quality, consistent product. Okay. You actually get rewarded by the market to just constantly churn and burn. And that's the way it works. And look, and retailers, they buy that way too. And I don't blame them. Retailers buy what their customers want. That's what they do. And what it takes is that's why there's very few brands that long-term ultimately break through to the other side. Because I don't like to name names. You guys are in the media, plus it's wrong for me to do so. But I think we can all think of brands that over the last decade that have been the hot brand that seemed like it was just on an interstellar, rocket ship going to the moon, that have really kind of slowed and fizzled and died, right? And that's really kind of what normally does happen. It's very rare for companies to break through to the other side. It's a tough gig.
Yeah, no. What I found was interesting is you were on Cigar Authority recently, and I think it was your last appearance on there, and you talked a lot about what it takes for a brand and what it costs really, and what you make as a new brand.
I did that program out of spite because they had a guest episode that was supposed to talk about what it costs to get into the cigar business.
Yeah.
And he gave no numbers. He gave no cost. And I listened to the whole damn thing thinking, okay, eventually there's going to be I want some meat on this bone, and there was no meat at all.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I ended up doing that program, and it's, it's interesting for anyone that's into the really uber geeky side of the business to really see what the numbers actually are. And this is the reason why you see a lot of brands, they get to a certain size and then eventually they become like almost a big box brand. You know what I mean? Where the brand ends up being primarily sold at discount at one of the big box places because they'll capitalize on that part where you're hot and the amount of the brand equity that you built in that short amount of time, and then they'll milk it. Okay, and they'll use that forever. The problem is when you go down that path, there's no way to recover from it from a brand point of view. And look, it's not a bad path because the reality is you make way more money. If I just said, hey, I'm just going to start making all of my cigars much cheaper, and I take the brand equity that I currently have and I let the big box guys run with it, I will make more money doing that. That's a much better short-term return for my dollar. Long-term, it doesn't let you become a Davidoff. It doesn't let you become a Padron. It doesn't let you become a Fuente. It doesn't let you become an Oliva. And I think that's the thing that most people don't realize. When I started smoking cigars, Fuente was a brand that you bought because it was cheap, the bundle product. That's what Oliva was. Any retailer that's been in the business for a while remembers there were no high-price Olivas. They were the stand-up bundle rack that they used to put in all the shops. That's what Oliva was. It was a cheap bundle cigar. Padrones, they weren't making high-end cigars until the mid-'90s. I mean, God rest his soul, old man Padron will tell you, he believes that the thing that set him apart was he was making a cigar in Cayocho that was literally a penny cheaper than his competitor. He was making a simple Quesadore Fuma, and it was like 17 cents, and his competitors were like 18 or 19 cents. You know what I mean? And that's what differentiated him to get him out of the gate to go on to, become, now having the whatever, the 40th and the 50th and the 80th and the hammers and all these other things. But
right.
That's a journey that, starts, in the 60s that you went through. We're talking about 50 years of history to get to the point that they're at now. For me, I'm too old. I'm not going to make it, so I don't know how this is going to work out.
I guess time will tell.
I just don't have enough years left to do it.
Yeah. Now there's a few questions and comments in the chat. I want to kind of scroll back because I don't want to miss these. A couple of people had a couple of questions. Well, here's one right here. Question for Steve: have you considered a Lancero in the Brulee or the Brulee Blue?
I've made samples of both, and they both suck. The blend does not translate well into the narrow ring gauges.
Mitchell said, I don't think he's going to do Lanceros. He made the...
I wouldn't do a Lancero because Lanceros just suck separately. But do I try it? I try it. I'm curious.
Have you tried the Lancero in all your blends just to see how it works? Is that like a regular thing?
Yeah. I try all the Vitolas.
You try all... So when you go through a new blend and you're coming up with something, you say you go through all the Vitolas. There's a lot of Vitolas.
Well, not all the Vitolas. But the basic categories,
Yeah.
Lancero, Coronas, Robustos, Toros, Torpedoes, double Coronas, Gordos, some variations in between certain ones, a Cuban Corona Gordo, which is 5 5/8 by 46. I pretty much do all of the blends in about 12 different sizes as kind of a baseline that kind of covers the spectrum. To kind of get a sense of where it's at, where it works better, how much tweaking is going to be necessary to make it work in a smaller size or in a larger size. Some blends don't work well in a small size, and some blends don't work well in a large size. You notice I have 7x64s in Mi Querida and Mi Querida Triqui Characa. I don't have a 7x64 in any of my other products because I just don't think it translates well in that size. That blend works in those sizes. Just the same way as I don't have a small narrow ring gauge Sobremesa Brulee. I haven't come up with a small Brulee that I didn't feel. Every time I make it smaller, the extra combustion temperature because of the narrow ring gauge, it just makes it a little bitter and a little acrid and a little sharp. And part of the way I get around that is with the Sobremesa Brulee Blue by having to age it an extra year. Okay, so but I can't just make petite Coronas and charge those kind of prices and sit on them for a whole year. You know what I mean? So I also have to think from a business point of view what makes the most sense. So certain blends translate better than other blends. But the Now Leave Me the Hell Alone blend, it sucks if it isn't a Lancero. The blend was just to be a Lancero from jump. That's what it was destined to be from the beginning. But that blend, it doesn't do well in larger formats at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. And someone actually had asked a question for Steve. What is your favorite Vitola?
My favorite Vitola. I'm boring. I smoke a lot of just plain old 6x52s, but probably my favorite is 6x48, and you see that in a lot of my lines. I make a lot of what I would consider to be a short, skinny Churchill, or I call it a thick Lonsdale. 6x48 for me is a size that I really, really like. So 5 and 5/8 by 46, 6x48. Those are probably my personal favorites. And I smoke more Toros than anything else. Look, depending on the blend, I love the SakaKhan and the 7x54. I think the blend just really, really works. This blend in this size is a really good blend. You know,
Someone had also asked, is the Krakatoa going to be a limited release? Or is that going to be a standard?
Krakatoa will be like all the other Muestras. It'll get launched. It'll be limited in the beginning because the way all Muestras work is we take pre-orders, and then I typically make about enough product to release about 500 additional boxes every month after the initial launch. So we'll do an initial launch. We'll typically sell about 5,000 boxes on the initial launch, and then I'll sell about another 500 a month. And then depending on how popular it is, it'll then determine whether I increase the production or I decrease the production to stay in line. Recently, I have found that, like with the Lancero, the numbers were fine. Naka Tamale, they were too low. Unstolen Valor, way too low. It's like I still haven't caught up on Unstolen Valor. And I'm imagining Bewitched has become really, that one's really selling far more. But also it's part of my how much risk am I willing to take? You know what I mean? You make something, you have no idea how it's going to do. It's a very expensive product. Um, Unlike most companies that when they make mistakes like that, they just discount it really cheap. I'm unwilling to do that. I'd rather just light it on fire than give away stuff.
Right.
So I have to be pragmatic. I never, the only thing that I intentionally limit is unicorns, and that's just because they're a pain in the ass, and I just don't want to, because I hand sort all that tobacco myself. But with everything else, I've always said this: as much as the market will consume, I'm willing to make as long as I can, as long as I have the tobacco and I have the capacity and I can make it the same quality and consistency. It's my job to get cigars made and to put them in boxes so consumers can buy them. So I don't intentionally limit anything, but what ends up happening is the market sometimes just consumes way more than what you were anticipating. And as a small company with no investors, it's all my own money. There's a lot of risk involved. So I don't want to make 10,000 boxes of Bewitched out of the gate to find out that, oh, the first 5,000 boxes went out there and people think they suck. And then now what do I do with the other 5,000 boxes of this cigar? This is not little money. So I have to be very judicious about it. And the other benefit to being that way is it also means that you don't have a lot of starting and stopping. It lets you make a product and keep it going all the time consistently. And it lets you kind of allow the organic sales to grow the product, which in the end is the more stable that you can be on the production end of things, overall, the better quality of cigar that's going to end up ultimately in the box, the consumer. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I probably miss out on a lot of short-term dollars for, but at the same time, Muestra is a perfect example. When I initially launched the Muestra line, my intent was that every year I was going to launch a new Muestra as a limited, and then it was going to go away to be replaced by the one next year. Well, I'm still selling all the Muestras that I made from the beginning. There's Exclusivo, and there's Naka Tamale, and there's Now Leave Me the Hell Alone, and there's Unstolen Valor, and now there's Bewitched. So the fact that these limiteds continue going, and that's the reason why I never use the term limited edition. I always use the term limited production because I don't want to box myself in and, say, oh, well, I'm never going to make any more of that because that's just stupid. If it's a good cigar and people like it, then yeah, I'm supposed to make more. That's what you're supposed to do.
Right. Do you think that there's too many of those limited editions, and I use the air quotes on that, out there on the market today versus doing a limited production like you just kind of explained?
Look, it's not my position to judge other people's businesses. I mean, I can't answer that question. I just know that here's what I do know. I know that when I see the companies that get on that constant limited edition train, they eventually run out of steam. I mean, we can all think of brands that got incredibly hot based on their limited editions, but ultimately, once you get to the 30th limited, every time you make a cigar, there's going to be someone that likes it and someone that dislikes it, no matter what it is. And you only get so many bites at the apple with a consumer. So there are brands out there that today are probably making some of the best cigars they've ever made, but we as consumers have already dismissed it, that their products aren't for us. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you got to be really, really careful to not burn that out. U-boats are a perfect example. We could sell 4 times as many U-boats as what we're going to sell tonight. There's enough. But at the same time, it's a very short-term kind of philosophy. I would rather just make more U-boats every single year, grow it a little every year, let it grow on its own, let it become what it becomes, and go from there. I mean, look, red meat lovers started off with 500 10-count bundles, and now it's to the point that it almost I can see red meat lovers actually becoming a whole brand potentially,
just by itself.
Yeah, because there's enough demand for the product. There's enough consumers that have tried it and decide, wow, they really like the cigar.
Yeah, I know recently you had done, this is one that's in our backyard as well, is Federal. You did the cigar for the 100th anniversary for Federal,
Right.
which was interesting. And I remember you made a post about it saying, and please just correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember I thought you had said something along the lines of, this is why I don't like to do store exclusives, or something along those lines, or something.
Yeah,
like
I don't want to drag it all up, but it was a project I didn't really want to do, and I ended up agreeing to. That went a little bit awry. Luckily, cigars were really good, and there weren't very many of them, so it was a non-issue long term. It's a good blend, the Federal 100. I think if you like, it has a lot of similarities, in my opinion, to the Sin Compromiso, but a bit stronger. So it's a different blend, but I think for the Sin Comp guy that wants a little more oomph, a little more pep, which is kind of what the Paladin is in a way, but a different blend in itself. But yeah, look, there are certain things like, look, I live in New Hampshire. I'm friends with all the retailers. You're having your 100th anniversary. It's very hard to say no.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When someone asks you to make a cigar, to celebrate their 100th anniversary, it's hard to say no to that.
Oh, absolutely. I was more, and I didn't mean to really like single them out as an example. I meant more or less kind of like what you were talking about with like limited editions. Do you find that those store exclusives that are like one-offs, would you kind of count that in that same category of like doing something just one time and then?
Well, that's what you would hope would happen, but that never seems to be what happens. I mean, look, I'm still making red meat lovers, and I'm still making. I mean, this is the 3rd iteration release of U-Boat, and I've made Frog Juice multiple times, and
Don Derma.
I mean, what else? Don Derma like 5 or 6 times at this point.
Yeah.
So I mean, you always think it's going to be a one-time gig, but you're happy that it isn't too, because the thing with so many of these products that get made as store exclusives are they're not typically really unique. They're typically just taking something you do existing and giving it a cute name and a different band, and maybe you make it a different size or you flop a wrapper on it. But I don't approach them that way. I approach them as like dedicated individual projects that deserve a unique blend. And the reason why I do that is I know that the consumer that's going to go out of his way to buy a box of U-Boats tonight is going to probably be one of my most loyal customers that really likes Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. And they deserve something different than me just making a different size of Mi Querida and charging them more money with a new name on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
They deserve a different experience. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the limiteds end up ultimately failing as a long-term strategy, because I don't think most people put the time and effort into them, and they look at it as a way to make money. And you don't make money if you do it correctly. the whole value and all of the limited production stuff is in the marketing value, is where the value is. So if you're looking to make a lot of money on 500 boxes of something, you're crazy. There's no money to be made. I mean, it's like you pretty much, you're lucky if you can break even on 500 boxes of anything, particularly when you do something unique. And that's the reason why most aren't. Most are really just some sort of retread.
Right. Oh, is it already? Oh, yeah. The time just goes so fast.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nicole. So Nicole has to remind me a lot of times where we are at the time, because I won't watch because I'll just be engaged in the show and the guests and the conversation, and it's already 7:17. I know you're gonna have to wrap soon, so I have to be cautious of time. We have one. We have
about another half hour.
Okay. Well, we got one fun segment that I'm gonna do probably after. I'm gonna touch on something first, and then we'll end the show with that. So we're talking about current what's going on right now. Other than I know you're doing U-Boat tonight. We saw you at the trade shows, both TPE and PCA this year. PCA obviously being the more recent one. We saw you're bringing out the holiday blend in the Stillwell. The Stillwell being a new project that you started last year. Obviously, you're smoking the SakaKhan, the Micallef Black that we talked about a little bit before. Stillwell Star, really quickly on that one. For those who don't know about it, and then I'll kind of go from there. Just what led to that project? For those who don't know, it's a cigar you did. You used a lot of pipe tobaccos in the filler. But what really led to that?
Well, I've always been a closet pipe smoker. When I was younger, I couldn't afford to smoke as many handmade cigars because they cost a lot. You could smoke a pipe much cheaper. And so in my younger years, I smoked a lot of pipe. And then as I started working in factories, I would occasionally make pipe tobacco cigars where I would just take some of my favorite pipe tobaccos and just add them to an existing blend. So it was something that I had already done for myself. We came into the COVID year and 2020, and I had become friends with Jeremy Reeves. He turned out to be a fan of my cigars. He's the master blender of pipe tobaccos for them. And I then told him that I was a real fan of his, and we just started having a conversation. And I said, "Hey, Jeremy, I make these pipe tobacco cigars casually, and some of them I use some of your tobaccos in. Let me send you some to try." And that's really kind of what started it, because I couldn't travel to Nika until the very end of 2020. In fact, I think actually my first trip back to Nika was January 2021. I was able to go to South Carolina and spend some time with him at his pipe tobacco factory. That's kind of where the project started. And for me, it's different. And look, one of the things that you always have to worry about when you're launching a new brand is you don't want to compete with yourself. And when you make something like Stillwell Star, it's just such a different product that it doesn't take away from Mi Querida sales or Brulee sales or Sin Compromiso sales. It's really a much different customer that's probably going to like those. Now, there's some overlap. I have guys that smoke Mi Querida, and they also smoke, Stillwell Stars. But for the most part, it's a different consumer. So for me as a company, it's a really appealing product because it's unique and it's different. And it gave me a chance to do something that I don't normally get to do. And surprisingly, when you look online, it's a brand that doesn't seem like it's doing all that well from a social media perspective. I mean, I see photos of it, but not as much as like some of my other brands, right? You don't see as many people posting about Stillwell Star as you do my other stuff.
Right.
But the reality is Stillwell Star is actually, it's right there as either my number one or number two selling brand this year.
Really?
I mean, it's doing incredibly well. Yeah. It really is. There's, again, different consumer.
Right. Yeah, you kind of created a whole new category there. In a sense, like you said, you don't want to go into competition. You have to look at your competition. With that one, you kind of created a whole new lane there, and that's one of the reasons why we did our awards for 2021. You were actually the recipient of the most innovation award that we gave out, which we gave to you at the trade show.
Frame it. It's somewhere to be framed.
I think Abe's the only one that framed his award.
No, I'm going to frame it. I frame all the. Look, you're always appreciative to be acknowledged. I mean, so. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I wanted to touch on that because that's definitely not just a new line, but it's a very new as a whole category. And
Well, it's not that I invented the wheel. I mean, there've been pipe tobacco cigars in the marketplace before. It's just no one's ever done it with that level of attention to detail.
yes,
No, because they're always thinking about who's going to smoke this. And this is one of the things I think. So when I was at Drew State, we had a ton of people try to compete with us on acid, right?
yeah,
And the thing that they never really understood about the acid smoker, look, I'm not an acid guy. I find it disgusting to smoke. It's not in my palate. Okay.
okay,
But there's a consumer that absolutely loves that. They love that flavor. They love that smell. So we never treated that consumer as though they were a redheaded stepchild. We never treated that customer as though they were a lesser customer. If they were willing to spend $7 to $10 for a handmade cigar, they deserved a cigar that was worthy of $7 to $10, just as any of the other legacy mainstay brands that were in the marketplace. And that's the thing that separated us and why Drew Estate became so big, is because everyone else that kept, I mean, look, STG, well, at the time General, they had Helix Remix, and there's a ton of companies that were making infused flavor, whatever you want to call it. But they always did it on the cheap. They always thought, oh, it doesn't matter. This tastes cherry. These guys don't know any better. And they would make it out of the cheapest materials. And it just, it just wouldn't smoke well. It wouldn't be a good experience. And I think that's the same thing in the pipe tobacco segment. There have been pipe tobacco cigars in the past, but nobody ever said, hey, let me make top shelf. Let me use all the best of the best, not just the best, pipe tobacco, but just even the best cigar tobaccos. Let me put it on quality pairs. And look, in Stillwell Stars, they're a $15 cigar. I mean, it's look, that pipe tobacco isn't cheap. It runs about $80 a pound for the high end stuff. Yeah, about 80. Some of it's higher than that. You know what I mean? So it's really, really costly to do the project, to do it right. Now, can you buy lane limited 1Q bulk and you can get that stuff for like $4 a pound? Sure. Well, $4 a pound is too cheap. You can't get it for $4 a pound, but you get a sub 10, right? It's not the same.
right.
It just isn't. And for that consumer that can appreciate the difference and they're willing to spend the money, well, why don't you give them something that's worthy for them to spend their money on? And I think that's the big difference, is so many people on my side of the business just assume those customers aren't worth it, that they won't know the difference. They won't care, and look, in the end, we all care. We may not be cigar experts, but we all know what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy, right? We know the difference. And look, yeah, is there always going to be a Bud Light guy? There's always going to be a Bud Light guy, but he's never going to be my customer. He's going to be buying his cheap bundles from whatever website and getting whatever he's getting. So that guy I can't even touch. But for the guys and girls that can tell the difference and are willing, you can make a product for them. And it's always been my approach to things. I don't try to appeal to everybody. I don't worry about the volume as much as I worry about satisfying the customer that is my customer. And for me, my customer is me. So if I'm unwilling to buy it and I'm unwilling to smoke it, why would I ask someone else to do the same?
Yeah, no, very, very well said. One of the things about Stillwell that has kind of been talked about a little bit that I wanted to get your opinion on is, we talk a lot about flavored cigars and diffused cigars, and you mentioned acid and kind of did a little comparison there. Would you classify, I mean, when it really comes down to it, Stillwell as a flavored cigar?
I would classify the aromatic number one as being sort of not. It's weird because it's pipe tobacco that's been cased in the aromatic number one. So there's definitely some flavor that is being added to those 3 grams of pipe tobacco. It's not the same as most of the flavor products in the marketplace, but yeah, to be literal, I think an aromatic number one, it could fall into that category. Now, legally, it gets really fuzzy because of just the way all these individual states are treating these products. It's hard to really tell one way or the other. Look, dude, Busch Light is not the same. Busch Light's a much better beer. So let's be clear about that. I like Miller Lite, so I'm not a beer snob here, but Bud Light's piss. But yeah, so I mean, but the other ones, the English, no. The Bayou, no way whatsoever. The Navy's a little fuzzier because the Navy has rum, but the rum never comes in contact with the tobacco. The rum goes in the water in the cavendishing table, and it's used to steam that tobacco while you're cavendishing it, but all the alcohol gets burned off in the process. So is it not? I don't know. And the other thing too is, I think something that most consumers are aware of is there are many legacy mainstay brands that they've been adding some sort of flavoring to the fermenting process for many, many decades. Okay, it's called platooning, bethooning. Those two terms are interchangeable. This is not something new. In fact, if you read some of the old write-ups from as early as the late 1600s, they were always talking about this process of using alcohol during the fermentation, using wine, using juniper, using coriander. This is not a new invention. It's kind of a question of, can you taste it? Is it a distinguishing flavor? Is it characterizing? I think in the case of aromatic number one, it is. I think in the case of this year's holiday Stillwell, it's definitely. But is it chocolate? Is it cherry? Is it raspberry? It's none of those things, right? Which then it even gets a little fuzzier from a regulatory point of view. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, I don't classify it as a flavored product, but I don't not classify it either, right? I'm going to leave that up to the federal government. But the only one there could be a question on is the aromatics, because aromatic pipe tobaccos are cased. They've always been cased. That's what aromatic pipe tobacco is. And it also happens to be the most popular of all the pipe tobaccos. Now, for the hardcore pipe guys, some of them will stick their noses in the air, right? They tend to be more towards the vapors and the English styles and the Scottish and the Balkans and all of those things. But the vast majority of pipe tobacco that is smoked is an aromatic case style of tobacco. Now, when it comes to aromatic tobaccos, even in the pipe, I tend to prefer the softer ones, right? Ones that aren't so goopy and so, sugary and all of that. So like if there'll be an aromatic pipe tobacco that I really like, I will buy it and I will cut it with some of my favorite mild English blends, right? Where I'll be literally like 4/5 of the traditional English, and then it'll be a sprinkling of the aromatic, just to add a little bit of that in there. And I think that's kind of the way the aromatic is now. It doesn't smoke the same way as a deadwood or as an acid or any of the other flavored cigars in the market. It's a much more subtle kind of expression, which can be good or bad. It could be too much of an expression for the people that don't like that, too little of an expression for people that do like that. So it's a catch-22.
Yeah, it's something that I've had conversations with other people, and obviously most people by now know about the threats of the flavor ban and all that. And it's like, well, where does Stillwell kind of fall into that category? Does it technically fall in there? Does it not? If it doesn't, and a flavor ban does go into effect, does it get pulled in, or does it become the?
If ultimately it's determined that it's going to be banned, I will stop making it. It's just that simple. It's not, the company's not living or dying by Stillwell Star aromatic number one. Much different situation when you're Swisher and acid is your biggest seller. You have to die on that hill. That's a fight you have to have.
Right.
Okay. And look, we were having that fight long before FDA. I mean, Maine had a flavor ban, and we ended up submitting acid they had a panel of tasters that were sanctioned by the state of Maine to determine whether a product was considered flavored, had a characterizing flavor or not. And we submitted acid, and even in the end of them doing it, they decided that they didn't count it because they couldn't identify they knew it tasted different, but it didn't taste cherry to them. It didn't taste vanilla to them. It didn't taste cotton candy to them. You know what I mean? It wasn't great. So even that independent board in the state of Maine decided that acid was not a flavored cigar as far as they were concerned.
That's
this is all in the air. Who knows where it's going to go? I mean,
yeah, I know. Time will tell. It's the way she goes, I guess. I want to hit our last segment before we get too close to the end here. Our top three segment, once again brought to you by Room 101.
Watch the Smokin Tabacco Show. Eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, smoke Room 101.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's why I didn't. I let Matt say it.
Luthi does a great job.
Oh yeah. You never know what you're gonna get with him. Our top three this week, Steve. I know you travel a lot to Nicaragua and South America, and obviously mostly for work purposes, right?
Only for work.
But you just came back from your trip in Europe, and you mentioned that you hadn't been on a true vacation in a while. But when you do travel and you do want to take some time away, you and the missus,
yes.
Where are the three places in the world that you like to go to get away from all of this cigar nonsense and just kind of be Steve?
There's only one place I like to go.
Really?
It's called away. I like to go where there's nobody. Okay, so oddly enough, the Switzerland thing wasn't quite that, but it kind of was because we rented a place that was a little very private. It was just Sydney and I, even though obviously we see people every day. But I'm always the guy that's like, hey, I want the private place and a private. I just want quiet. So for me, we tend to go more mountains than we do go beach. Neither Sydney or myself are really beach people. We both tend to prefer cooler, higher climates. So there's more mountain than there is beach, but it doesn't mean the last real vacation I took was like 3 years ago, and we went to St. John's for a week over the Christmas holiday. So that was cool. But again, we had a private villa. It was just her and I. I don't want the resort experience,
right?
At all. To me, going to Disney World would be like I'd rather eat a gun. Okay, that's a job to go to something like that. To go on a Viking River cruise is just like misery to me. I can't even imagine that. I'm like, what's cool? You go to Switzerland. We rent a car. We decide where we're going to go every day on our own. We do our own thing, and yeah, we probably miss out on a lot of great stuff, but that's okay because I just need some quiet.
Yeah, I mean, a vacation is whatever it is to you. There's no rule. You don't have to do something. It's whatever makes you feel like you took a break, you stepped away, got away. For you just want the quiet. I get it. It's actually pretty nice, to be honest with you. Especially nowadays. I feel like there's too many people. Like, we go to the trade shows in Vegas.
That's nothing but work.
And it's it's like outside of the actual trade show. It's like when you're walking around like those resorts. You're right. It's just people wall to wall. It's like, what kind of enjoyment is that? I mean, one of the best times we had was we went down to the Great Smoke. We didn't even stay at a hotel. We just rented an Airbnb out of the way. Just a quiet neighborhood and a house. Us and the How About That Cigar guys. It was great.
Right.
It was great. Just being away from everyone. You could just come home at the end of the night and just felt like you were at home. Just be away. Except we were in Florida and it was cold up here at the time, so it was really nice. But yeah, no, that's an interesting answer. Another question I had for you, just another random, just get your mind off cigar stuff. If you could have lived in another decade that you either weren't alive for or maybe you're too young for, like as an adult, you could really experience it. What decade would that be?
I think the 50s, right?
Yeah.
The 50s were just full of promise and invention, and it was a time of relative peace. I mean, it's hard not to be enamored with the 50s. I think that would be a time era where I would have enjoyed it. I mean, it's easy to romanticize about the 19th century, but I think I'd be miserable. I think too much work, too spoiled, too many conveniences that I wouldn't want to give up.
Yeah.
So I think the 50s would be like the right cutting point for me.
Yeah.
50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
Pre-Vietnam War, right? That period between World War II and the Vietnam War. That would be a place I'd like to experience.
Oh, you had Korea in there too.
Yeah, but Korea wasn't as impactful, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Obviously it was for the people that went to Korea, hugely impactful. But
yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, we have a question from Chris Duke. Ask Steve, what was your favorite moment during your recent European trip, not cigar related?
Well, I actually didn't have any cigar related stuff when I was in Switzerland, so it was pretty much no cigars. So I think my favorite part was the time I spent on that. Because I ran kind of a chalet apartment scenario, and it had a beautiful deck that was overlooking. You could see the I don't want to call them foothills because they're mountains, the hills of the Alps. Just spent, it was to just be there, and I drank more wine on this trip than I probably drank in an entire 2-year period. It was like every night I went through at least a bottle, if not 2 bottles of wine, and it was nice. It was relaxing.
Well, that's nice. That sounds nice. Yeah, maybe next year we'll go out to there. I don't know. Nicole, for those who don't know, Nicole spent a large portion of her childhood growing up in England. So for me, and I haven't been to Europe. So for me, my first European trip is I want to go to England and see London and go to Ireland. And her family's Irish and from Ireland, and her mother was born in Ireland. And I want to see Dunbarton.
I've never been to Ireland. I've been most places in Europe, in the UK, in England, and I've been all over Scotland, which is amazing. But we've never made it to Ireland. But Ireland would be up City and Mai's alley. Ireland, Iceland. Like next year, Cindy and I have already decided, either before Inter Tobacco or after Inter Tobacco, we're gonna go to Norway.
Oh, nice.
We've never been to Norway before, so we're gonna tack on a week because. Look, I don't know what the plane prices are going to be next year, but this year they were crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was absurd how much the plane tickets cost. And no offense to my friends in Germany, but Dortmund really does suck. And I think most Germans would agree that part of Germany, the pretty Germany, that's the fat industrial kind of sprawlish. Yeah, it's not where you go in Germany to vacation. I can say that.
It's not glamorous, so to speak. It's not glamorous.
No, and again, man, how do I say something and not get in trouble?
But isn't that part of what makes you who you are? You say things that get you in trouble.
I think going to Dortmund would be kind of like saying I'm going to Akron, Ohio. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm going to go to Akron, Ohio. You know what I mean? That's where.
It's like,
that's
why?
what Dortmund is. Right. Look, there are great people in Akron, but it's not where you choose on a map to say, "Hey, I'm going to Akron." You know?
Yeah, no, that's a great example, and that's what I've been told about going to Dortmund. Someone had told me recently, like, yeah, you should go to Inter Tobacco, but I'll tell you, outside of that, there's really not much going on out there in Dortmund. It's really not glamorous.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's not like there's amazing restaurants. There's nothing to see. It's just you're there for the international trade show, and it's a much different trade show. It's not really a selling show. It's more talk to distributors and talk to international retailers. You don't tend to write very many orders at the trade show because the way the business is done internationally is so significantly different. You're basically talking about the cigars you're going to sell next year to that distributor, and they're buying in much larger quantities because they're sending the product because they're the ones that then go and sell to the individual retailers in their country.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the time here, and it's 7:40, and I know you got to go soon, so I want to try to wrap this up soon. But before I do, first of all, I want to say, Steve, thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for giving us the time. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show with us. We really appreciate it.
I really think Nicole shouldn't talk so much. She sucks up so much of the time.
She is very shy. She's on the shyer side. She does all the behind the scenes stuff on the computer for me, so that I don't have to think about it. But she is a little shy. I know.
I'm getting better. I just absorb. I'm here for, I don't know.
Well, hopefully, for the next for the next trade shows for next year, we're going to be bringing more people to the shows to get even more coverage. And I think Nicole's going to have to start doing some interviews on her own. So I think that'll really help her get out of her shell moving forward, which will be cool.
So you guys will go to TPE again this year?
Yes, we will be there.
With 2 teams, so.
Well, 2 pairs. Yeah.
Yep.
There'll be 4 of us in attendance.
Oh, even at TPE, you find that's necessary there?
After our first run we're going to see how it goes this year. Also, I mean, to be fair, last year was our first run through at TPE, so, but I think we're going to try it this year. PCA, 100%. I mean,
PCA is much harder to cover, though. There's tons of new product releases. There's so many more booths. It's so spread out. I mean, TPE, you can walk the whole cigar section in, what, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a couple hours at the most. It's not the same, so.
Yeah. Well, one of the people that will be with us is already there, so he doesn't really have to travel, so that makes it easier. So only 3 of us will be traveling, so that'll be cool. Other than that, it's I think the TPE this year is going to be a trial run, and then maybe we'll see. But for after last year, I was like, yeah, we should maybe bring a couple more people next year. It just kind of helps break it up. It's not just the videos; it's going back and getting some other stuff and photos and just the general. We try to get everybody.
I don't think that the people that watch the coverage or read the articles have any idea how much time it takes to do all of the post on all of this stuff. It's really, it's horrendous. And I look, I used to run a website called Cigar Nexus, and I would kill myself at the trade show. I mean, literally, I'd be lucky if I got 2 hours of sleep a night.
Oh yeah,
it was rough.
Coop doesn't even sleep. He stays up.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I know we're running out of time. I once again, I just want to thank you for being here, and I appreciate it. And we'd love to have you back.
No, thank you. Anytime. Just ask. We talk about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Next time we'll get into more saucy stuff, and we'll see where that leads. But other than that, Steve, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you very much, guys. Don't forget to watch later on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and everywhere you can find your podcast. And as always, visit SmokinTabacco.com for more news and updates from the cigar industry. And we'll be back with you on Saturday night. Once again, I know, sorry, last week I said we were going to do spare notes, but I forgot that Coop had a procedure done, and he just wasn't up for doing a show and smoking. So I did forget about that. But we will be back this Saturday night to talk about all of the hot things that have been happening. If you're following the news, you probably know. We'll be there. Same place, same time, as always, 9 p.m. Eastern. And with that, we'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Bye.